It's a strange thing, the moment your life splits in two. There is the before, and there is the after. And the line between them is often just a few simple words, spoken on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. For me, those words were, "We think it's time, Mum." My son, David, said them. He was standing in my own kitchen, the one where I taught him how to cream butter and sugar for cookies. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders were hunched, and he couldn't quite look me in the eye. The afternoon sun was streaming through the window over the sink, catching the faint dust motes dancing in the air. It was the same gentle light that had filled this room for 30 years. It felt like a lie. "Time for what, David?" I asked, though a cold, heavy stone had already settled in my stomach. I wiped my hands on my apron, a nervous habit. I had been chopping vegetables for a stew. The knife was still on the cutting board, next to a half-diced onion. The ordinary act felt suddenly absurd. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. It's just that the house is too big for you now. And with the market being what it is, and Sarah and I, we've been thinking, it's time for you to find something smaller. Something easier to manage." He said we. He always said we and now. It was never I think anymore. It was always a Sarah and I think. My daughter-in-law, Sarah. She was a good woman, a wonderful mother to my grandchildren. But in that moment, the word we felt like a wall they had built, a wall I was on the wrong side of. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. That's what you might expect, isn't it? A torrent of tears, a storm of anger. But all I felt was a profound, echoing silence inside me. The familiar sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, seemed to fade away. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. I looked past David, through the kitchen door and into the living room. I could see the faint scratch on the doorframe where we'd measured his height every birthday until he turned 18. I could see the worn patch on the rug where he'd played with his toy cars. This wasn't just a house. It was the living, breathing scrapbook of our lives. Every scuff mark was a memory. Every creaky floorboard was a story. "This house isn't too big for me, David," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "It's just the right size for all my memories." He flinched, just a little. "Mum, be practical. The stairs are getting steep. The garden is a lot of work. We worry about you here all alone." "I'm not alone," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I have all of you here with me, in every room." He didn't understand. How could he? He was looking at square footage and property values. I was looking at the ghost of a little boy running down the hallway. He was talking about the future. I was clinging to the past. "Sarah has already found a lovely assisted living facility," he continued, his voice gaining a rehearsed confidence. "It's called Sunset Gardens. It has a communal garden, activities, you'd have people your own age around." Sunset Gardens. The name sounded so final, like a peaceful place to wait for the end. I was only 68. I still felt young in my heart, especially within these walls. Assisted living. The words felt like a label, a box they were trying to fit me into for their own convenience. I turned away from him and picked up the knife. I started slowly, methodically dicing the rest of the onion. Maybe if I kept my hands busy, my heart wouldn't break. The pungent scent filled the air, and my eyes began to water. It was a perfect excuse for the tears that were finally starting to form. "Can we talk about this later, David?" I asked, my back to him. "The stew needs to simmer." There was a long pause. I could feel his hesitation. He had come here to get an answer, to check a task off his list. But he also saw my posture, the tremor in my hands. He was still my son, after all. "Okay, Mum," he said softly. "We'll talk later." I heard his footsteps retreat across the linoleum, then the soft click of the front door closing. He was gone. And I was left alone in the kitchen, with the simmering stew and the crushing weight of his request. The onion had made my eyes sting, but the real pain was much deeper. It was the slow, agonizing realization that the home I had built was no longer my own. They had asked me to leave. And in doing so, they had forgotten who built this home, not with bricks and mortar, but with love and a lifetime of sacrifice. I need to take you back. To make you understand, I need to show you what this house was. It was never just a structure. It was our sanctuary, our universe. Michael, my husband, and I bought it when I was pregnant with David. We were so young, bursting with a hope that felt limitless. The house was a wreck then. It was all we could afford. Peeling wallpaper, a leaky roof, floors that sloped so dramatically you could roll a marble from one end of the living room to the other. Michael was a carpenter. He had strong, capable hands and a quiet patience. "We'll make it a home, Clara," he'd said, his arm around my swelling belly. And we did. We spent every weekend and every evening working on it. I held the ladder while he fixed the roof. I sanded the floors until my arms ached, while he rebuilt the kitchen cabinets. We were partners in every sense of the word. We poured our sweat, our dreams, and our love into every nail hammered, every wall painted. I remember the day we finished the nursery. It was a soft yellow, the color of sunshine. Michael had built the crib himself, a beautiful, sturdy thing made of oak. We stood in that empty room, just the two of us, imagining the future. We could almost hear the sound of a baby's laughter echoing off the fresh walls. This house was built on a foundation of that anticipation, that pure, uncomplicated joy. David was born in the spring. We brought him home to this yellow room, and the house seemed to sigh with contentment. It was finally complete. The sounds of his cries and his gurgles filled the spaces we had so carefully prepared for him. Michael would come home from work, his clothes smelling of sawdust, and he'd scoop David up into his arms. We were a trio, a perfect, happy little unit. Life wasn't always easy. Money was often tight. But this house was our constant. It witnessed our whispered conversations about bills late at night. It witnessed our quiet celebrations of small victories, a promotion, a repaired car. It held us through tough times. When Michael's father passed away, it was within these walls that he finally broke down and cried, and it was here that I held him, the silence of the house a comforting blanket around us. Then, when David was 10, the unthinkable happened. Michael had a heart attack. It was so sudden, so brutal. One day he was here, a vibrant, living presence, and the next, he was gone. The house, which had always been so full of warmth, suddenly felt cavernous and cold. The silence wasn't comforting anymore, it was deafening. I felt lost, adrift in the very space we had created together. For a long time, I just went through the motions. I got David ready for school. I went to work. I came home. But the house felt like a shell. I thought about selling it. The memories were too painful. Every corner held a ghost of Michael. His favorite chair by the fireplace. The tool shed in the garden that still smelled like him. But one evening, I found David, just a little boy, sitting on the stairs, crying. He said, "If we leave, how will Dad find us?" That was the moment I knew we had to stay. This house was the last tangible connection David had to his father. It was my responsibility to keep that alive. So, I stayed. I poured all the love I had left into my son and into this home. I took on extra work to pay the mortgage. I learned how to fix a leaky tap and unclog a drain. I became both mother and father. This house saw my struggle. It saw my loneliness. It saw my tears, shed into my pillow night after night. But it also saw my strength. It saw me get back up, day after day, for David. The years passed. David grew up. The house was filled with the chaos and joy of his teenage years, loud music, friends constantly over, the smell of burnt pizza. I loved it. The noise filled the emptiness. I welcomed every one of his friends. This house became a hub, a safe place for them all. I was the mum who always had a pot of pasta on the stove and a listening ear. I loved feeling needed. I loved that the walls were once again vibrating with life. Then he met Sarah. I remember the first time he brought her home. She was a bit shy, very polite, with intelligent eyes. I liked her immediately. She brought out a calm, mature side of David I hadn't seen before. They fell in love, and our family grew. I was so happy for him. I never wanted to be the kind of mother-in-law who was possessive or intrusive. I welcomed Sarah with open arms. I wanted her to feel that this was her home, too. When they got married, we had the reception in the back garden. Michael and I had planted that garden together. We'd watched the saplings grow into strong, shade-giving trees. To see it filled with laughter and celebration, to see my son so happy under the branches we had planted, felt like a beautiful, full-circle moment. I felt Michael's presence that day more strongly than I had in years. It was as if he was standing beside me, smiling. When my grandson, Liam, was born, the cycle began again. I turned the sunny yellow nursery, which had become a storage room, back into a nursery. It felt right. It felt like destiny. Sarah would bring Liam over, and I would spend hours with him in that room, rocking him in the same chair I'd rocked David in, telling him stories about the grandfather he would never meet. The house was alive again with the sound of a baby. Then came Lily. 2 grandchildren. My heart was so full. They called me Narner. Our house was their second home. They had a toy box here. They had favourite cups and plates. They knew which step creaked and which cabinet held the biscuits. They helped me in the garden, their small hands patting the soil around the flowers. This house was building a new generation of memories. It was being woven into the fabric of their lives, just as it had been with David's. I thought the story of this house was one of continuity. Of loss, yes, but ultimately of love and renewal. I thought I would grow old here, that my grandchildren would one day bring their own children to visit Narner in the old house. I imagined them running through the same garden, hearing the same stories. I had built my entire world, my entire identity, around being the keeper of this home, the heart of this family. I never, not for a single moment, imagined that the heart could be asked to leave. The first sign was subtle, so small I almost missed it. It was a comment Sarah made one Sunday dinner. We were all gathered around the table, a tradition I cherished. Liam was telling a funny story about school, and we were all laughing. As I got up to clear the plates, Sarah said, "E.O., Clara, let me. You've done enough. You should just relax." It was a kind sentiment. But there was something in her tone, a slight emphasis on the wordy enough, that made me pause. It wasn't a let me help you. It was a let me take over. I brushed it off, chalking it up to my own sensitivity. But the pattern continued. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I was being eased out of my own kitchen. Sarah would arrive and immediately start rearranging things as she cooked. "I just find it more efficient this way, Clara," as she'd say with a smile. My old recipe box was pushed to the back of the counter in favour of her tablet with new, trendy recipes. She started referring to it as a David's house when she spoke to the children. "Don't make a mess at David's house," as she'd say. It was never in Narner's house anymore. I tried to talk to David about it once. "Do you think Sarah feels comfortable here?" I asked him. "She seems to want to change everything." He laughed it off. "Mum, she's just making it feel like her own space too. Don't be so territorial. We're all family." Territorial. The word stung. Was I being territorial? This was my home. Was it so wrong to want to hold on to the way things were? I felt a small, cold knot of anxiety form in my chest. I decided to try harder. I didn't want to be a difficult mother-in-law. I wanted harmony. Then came the safety conversations. David started pointing out things around the house that he deemed hazardous. This rug is a tripping hazard, Mum. These stairs are awfully steep. Have you thought about installing a chairlift? The bathtub is dangerous. You should really have a walk-in shower. Each comment felt like a critique of my ability to take care of myself. I was healthy. I took walks every day. I had never fallen. I felt like he was seeing a frail, old woman, not his mother who had single-handedly held everything together for decades. The biggest shift happened during Liam's 8th birthday party. I had, as always, offered to host it in the garden. I'd spent days planning games, baking his favourite cake, hanging decorations. The day before the party, Sarah called. "Clara, that's so sweet of you," as she said. "But we've actually decided to have it at the new Kidtopia Play Centre. It's just so much easier. They handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger." "But the garden is perfect for it," I said, my voice faltering. "And I've already baked the cake." "Oh, don't worry about the cake. Kidtopia provides a fantastic superhero-themed cake. Liam will love it. Just come and enjoy yourself as a guest." A guest. The word echoed in my head long after I'd hung up. I looked at the cake I'd made, sitting on the counter. It was Liam's favourite, chocolate with vanilla buttercream. It suddenly looked silly, amateurish compared to a professional, themed cake. I was being phased out. My offerings, my love expressed through acts of service, were no longer needed. They were an inconvenience. I went to the party at Kidtopia. It was loud and chaotic. The children were overstimulated, running from one plastic structure to another. The parents stood on the sidelines, sipping coffee, looking at their phones. There was no warmth, no sense of community. It was a transaction. I missed the messy, joyful chaos of parties in my garden, with children playing tag and the smell of grilled food in the air. I saw David and Sarah huddled together, coordinating the party favours. They were a perfect team, a sealed unit. I felt like a spectator, an outsider looking in. I tried to help by passing out juice boxes, but Sarah gently took them from me. "I've got a system, Clara," as she said with a tight smile. "Why don't you just sit down and relax?" So Saturday. I watched. And I felt a profound loneliness in that room full of screaming children and chatting adults. I was being relaxed right out of my own family's life. The conversations about the house became more frequent and more direct. David started bringing over brochures for new apartment complexes. "Look, Mum, this one has a gym and a swimming pool." He talked about the financial sense it made. "The equity in this house is your retirement fund, Mum. You could free it up and live comfortably." He made it sound so logical, so sensible. But to me, it felt like he was putting a price tag on my memories. He was talking about my home as an asset, not an anchor. One evening, they both came over. It felt formal, like a business meeting. We sat in the living room. Sarah did most of the talking. She laid out a spreadsheet. It projected the costs of maintaining the house versus the profit from selling it and the lower costs of an assisted living facility. "We've even found the perfect place, Clara," as Sarah said, her voice bright and efficient. "Sunset Gardens. It has excellent reviews. There are group activities, meal plans, you'd never be lonely." I looked at David. He was studying the pattern on the rug, unable to meet my gaze. He was letting her lead this. My own son was letting his wife negotiate the terms of my eviction from my own life. "I am not lonely here," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I have my friends. I have my garden. I have all of you." "But we worry," David said, finally looking up. "What if you fall? What if there's an emergency? At Sunset Gardens, there's help available 24/7. It's for your own good, Mum. For your own good. The most dangerous phrase in the world. It dismisses your feelings, your desires, your autonomy. It paints resistance as stubbornness and ingratitude. The tension was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a thick fog in the room every time we were together. I started dissing their visits. I found myself tidying up frantically before they came, trying to prove that the house wasn't a burden, that I wasn't a burden. I stopped offering opinions. I stopped baking for them, because the last time I did, Sarah had commented on the sugar content. I was walking on eggshells in my own home. The very place that had always been my refuge had become a source of constant anxiety. The walls that held so much love now seemed to whisper that my time here was limited. The conflict wasn't a loud, dramatic fight. It was a slow, quiet erosion of my place in the world. And I was powerless to stop it. The turning point didn't come from a dramatic argument. It came from a quiet, ordinary moment of devastating clarity. It was Liam's 10th birthday, and they had decided to have a small family celebration at their own house. I was invited, of course. But the invitation felt like an afterthought, a formality. I arrived with a carefully chosen gift for Liam and a homemade apple pie, his favourite. My hands were shaking as I rang the doorbell. I felt like a visitor. Sarah opened the door. "Clara, come in." She took the pie from my hands with a polite smile. "You shouldn't have." The house was modern and beautifully decorated. Everything was sleek, minimalist, and spotlessly clean. It was a lovely house, but it had no soul. No scuff marks on the door frames. No worn patches on the rugs. It felt like a show home. Liam was thrilled with his gifts, a new gaming console from his parents and the elaborate set of books and art supplies from me. He gave me a quick, sticky hug before running back to his game. The children were in their own world, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the television screen. We sat down for dinner at their elegant, glass-topped dining table. The conversation was pleasant but strained. We talked about the weather, about David's work, about Lily's school play. It was all surface level. I felt a distance, a chasm I didn't know how to cross. After dinner, Liam, still buzzing with birthday excitement, turned to David and said, Dad, can we go to the park tomorrow?" David ruffled his hair. "Not tomorrow, champ. We've got to go to Narner's house." My heart gave a little leap. They were coming to my house. Maybe things were returning to normal. But then Sarah chimed in, her voice light and casual. "That's right, sweetie. We need to start measuring the rooms and taking some pictures. We have to get Narner's house ready to sell so she can move to her nice new place." She said it so matter-of-factly, as if she were commenting on the weather. As if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of the room. There was a silence. Liam looked confused. "Sell Narner's house? Why? Where will she go?" "She's going to live at Sunset Gardens, remember?" Sarah said patiently. "It's a wonderful place for her. She'll be very happy there." Lily, who was only 6, looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "But Narner, won't you be sad? You love your house. You have your garden there." Her simple, honest question hung in the air. It was the question I had been too afraid to ask myself so directly. The question David and Sarah had been carefully avoiding. I looked at David. His face was pale. He was staring at his plate, his jaw tight. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't look at his own children. And in that moment, the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about stairs and gardens and practicality. This was about them. Their convenience. Their vision of a tidy, uncomplicated future. A future where I was safely tucked away in a managed facility, where my large, memory-filled house was no longer an obligation. They had made this decision, a huge, life-altering decision for me, without ever truly considering what I wanted. Without considering what this house meant. Sarah had spoken about selling my home in front of my grandchildren as if it were a done deal. And David's silence was his agreement. His silence was his betrayal. I felt a strange calm descend upon me. The anxiety, the walking on eggshells, it all just fell away. What was left was a deep, profound sorrow. I slowly put my napkin down on the table. My hands were steady now. "Lily, my dear," I said, my voice soft but clear. "Yes. I will be very sad. I love my house very much. It is my home." The room was utterly silent. David finally looked at me, his eyes wide with a kind of panic. "Mum," he began, but I held up a hand. "No, David. It's okay." I looked at Sarah, then back at him. "I think I understand now. This isn't a discussion anymore, is it? This is a plan. You've been planning this for a long time." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Clara, we're only thinking of you. Your safety, my safety." I interrupted, my voice still quiet but firmer. "Or your peace of mind?" I pushed my chair back and stood up. I felt 100 years old. "Thank you for dinner, Sarah. It was lovely." I walked over to Liam and Lily and kissed the tops of their heads. "Happy birthday, my darling Liam." I walked to the door without looking back. I could feel their stunned silence following me. I let myself out and walked to my car. The night air was cool on my face. I didn't cry. I just felt numb. The line had been drawn. The before was gone. I was now living in the after. The drive home was a blur. When I walked back into my house, it felt different. The silence wasn't lonely anymore, it was expectant. I walked from room to room, trailing my fingers over the surfaces. The scratch on the door frame. The worn spot on the rug. The kitchen counter where 1,000 meals had been prepared. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of the yellow nursery. The moon was shining through the window, casting a silvery light on the empty room. I thought of Michael. I thought of the dreams we had in this house. I thought of the life I had built here after he was gone. They had asked me to leave. But as I stood there in the moonlight, I realized they had already left me. They had moved on, and in their new life, my old-fashioned, memory-cluttered home and I were just relics. The turning point wasn't just their decision to sell the house. It was my realization that the family I thought I was the heart of had already found a new center. And there was no room for me in it. The days that followed were some of the darkest of my life, darker even than the time after Michael's death. Then, I had grief, but I also had purpose, David. Now, I felt a purposeless grief. The foundation of my world had crumbled. I didn't hear from David or Sarah for a week. The silence was a punishment, I suppose, for my quiet defiance at the dinner table. Or perhaps it was shame. I didn't know which was worse. I wandered through the house like a ghost. I would pick up a photograph and stare at it for a long time, trying to reconcile the happy, smiling people in the frame with the painful reality of the present. I knew I had a decision to make. I could dig my heels in. I could refuse to move. I could force a bitter, drawn-out battle that would poison whatever was left of my relationship with my son and my grandchildren. The thought made me feel sick. I loved them. Despite the pain, I loved them. I did not want my last years to be defined by a legal war over a deed. The other option was to surrender. To pack my things, to walk away from my home, and to try to find some semblance of peace in the sterile, unfamiliar halls of Sunset Gardens. The thought filled me with a dread so profound it was physical. It felt like a slow death. I was trapped. There was no good path forward. I felt a crushing weight of powerlessness. This was my home, but the world saw it as a property, and my son saw it as a problem. One rainy afternoon, I found myself in the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. It was full of dust and memories. There were boxes of David's old school projects, his first pair of shoes, his university textbooks. And there, in a corner, was Michael's old trunk. My heart ached as I lifted the heavy lid. The familiar scent of cedar and old paper wafted out. Inside were his things. His old sweaters. His favorite books. And at the very bottom, a large, flat portfolio I hadn't looked at in decades. I carried it down to the living room, my arms trembling. I untied the leather strings and opened it. Inside were the architectural drawings for the house. Not the original plans, but the sketches Michael had made when we first bought the place. His neat, precise handwriting filled the margins. Notes like, "A knock down this wall for an open-plan kitchen, Clara's idea." Or, "A bay window here for morning light, perfect for her reading chair." I traced the lines with my finger, as if I could touch the hope and love embedded in them. Then, tucked between 2 pages, I found a letter. It was in Michael's handwriting, but I had never seen it before. My breath caught in my throat. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then I suppose my number's up sooner than we hoped. I'm not one for big speeches, as you know. But I had to write this down. I look at this house, and I don't see wood and plaster. I see our future. I see you, rocking our child in that sunny room. I see us growing old together in that kitchen, drinking tea and watching the birds in the garden we planted. This house is my love for you, made real. I built it for you, for us, for our family. Whatever happens, Clara, promise me you'll hold on to this place. It's your sanctuary. It's your strength. I know you can face anything as long as you have this anchor. Don't ever let anyone take your anchor away from you. You are the heart of this home. Always. All my love, forever." Michael. I read the letter once, then again, and again. The tears came then, great, heaving sobs that I had been holding back for weeks. He had known. He had known that one day I might need this reminder. He was speaking to me across 30 years, giving me the strength I had lost. Don't ever let anyone take your anchor away from you. His words were a rallying cry. I couldn't give up without a fight. But my fight wouldn't be one of anger. It would be one of truth. I called David. My voice was calm. "I need you to come over," I said. "Alone." He arrived an hour later, looking wary and defensive. I led him to the living room where Michael's sketches and the letter were laid out on the coffee table. "Sit down, David," I said gently. I didn't accuse him. I didn't beg him. I simply started telling him the story. Not the story of the conflict, but the story of the house. I showed him his father's sketches. I pointed to the note about the kitchen wall. "Your father wrote that," I said. "He was so proud of that idea." I showed him the drawing of the garden, with the trees we planted marked with little excess. "We planted that oak tree the week we found out I was pregnant with you," I said. "Your father said it would grow strong, just like you." I walked him through the house, room by room, and told him the stories he had forgotten. I told him about the night he had a high fever, and I rocked him in this very chair for hours. I showed him the patch in the hallway where I'd worn down the floorboards pacing with him as a colicky baby. I told him about the countless times I'd stood at the kitchen window, waiting for his headlights to appear in the driveway, my heart lifting when he came home safe. I was not building a case. I was rebuilding a history. I was showing him that this house was not just a building. It was the physical embodiment of his parents' love, his own childhood, and my life's work. Finally, I handed him his father's letter. He read it slowly. I watched his face change. The defensiveness melted away, replaced by a dawning horror. His shoulders slumped. When he finished, he didn't look at me for a long time. He just stared at the paper in his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. "Mum," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What have I done?" The dam broke. He started to cry, deep, ragged sobs. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry. We were just, it was so logical. The stairs, the garden, We thought we were helping. We thought we were doing the right thing. I went and sat beside him, putting my arm around his shoulders. My strong, grown-up son, crying like a little boy in the house where he grew up. I know you thought you were helping, David, I said softly. But you never asked me what I needed. You never asked me what this place means to me. You treated my home like a problem, and me like a problem that needed to be solved. I forgot, he choked out. I got so caught up in my own life, with the kids, with work. I forgot. I forgot who built this home. I forgot what it cost you. I forgot everything you sacrificed to keep it for us. We sat there for a long time, in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. It was the first honest moment we had shared in years. The resolution wasn't a victory or a defeat. It was a painful, necessary reckoning. The house had borne witness to another pivotal moment, not of its end, but of a fragile, hopeful new beginning. We didn't find a perfect, fairy tale ending. Life is messier than that. But we found a path forward, one built on understanding rather than imposition. David went home and had a long, difficult conversation with Sarah. I wasn't there, and I didn't ask for details. It was their marriage, their partnership, and they needed to navigate it themselves. I know it wasn't easy. Sarah had been acting from a place she believed was right, and having that challenged was painful for her. A few days later, they both came to see me. Sarah looked nervous. Clara, as she began, I owe you a huge apology. I was, or arrogant. I thought I knew what was best for you without listening to you. I treated your home like a project. I'm so very sorry. It was a genuine apology. And I accepted it. Holding on to anger would have only poisoned us all. Thank you, Sarah, I said. I know your intentions were good. We talked, really talked, for the first time. We talked about their fears for my safety, and we came up with practical, collaborative solutions. We agreed to install a handrail on the front steps. We found a wonderful local teenager who would come twice a week to help with the heavier gardening, which I actually looked forward to as a chance to share my love for the garden with someone new. We discussed my finances openly, and David helped me set up a clearer budget, not as a manager, but as a son helping his mother. The brochures for Sunset Gardens were thrown away. The spreadsheets were deleted. The word sell was banned from our vocabulary. The change in David was profound. He started coming over more often, not out of duty, but because he wanted to. He'd come on a Saturday morning with pastries, and would have coffee in the garden, just talking. He started asking me questions about his father, stories he'd heard 100 times but was now hearing with new ears. He brought Liam and Lily over, not for a formal visit, but to just be. One weekend, David showed up with a toolbox. That shed door has been sagging for years, Mum, he said. Dad would have fixed it by now. He spent the afternoon in the garden shed, repairing the door, oiling the hinges. The sounds of his hammering were the most beautiful music I had heard in a long time. He was, in his own way, picking up where his father left off. He was becoming a steward of this home, not its executor. The children felt the shift in the atmosphere. They were more relaxed, more joyful here. Lily and I started a new project, a fairy garden in a quiet corner. Liam, who had discovered a love for drawing, would sit with Michael's old sketches and try to make his own. The house was slowly weaving itself back into the fabric of their lives. I realized that my role was changing, and that was okay. I was no longer the sole manager of the family. I was its elder, its historian, its heart. My job was no longer to do everything, but to be the keeper of the stories, the guardian of the love that lived within these walls. I also started to live for myself a little more. I joined a book club at the local library. I started a small quilt for Lily, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for. I had friends over for tea in my garden, without worrying about whether the house was perfectly tidy. I was reclaiming my life, not just my property. One evening, as the autumn leaves were turning, we all had dinner at my house. It was a spontaneous, messy affair. The children helped me set the table, and we ordered pizza. We were laughing, telling stories, and the house was filled with a warm, chaotic, genuine joy. It felt like it used to. After the children were in the living room watching a movie, Sarah helped me clear the plates. She stopped and looked around the kitchen. "You know, Clara," as she said softly, "I think I'm finally starting to see it." "See what, dear?" I asked. "The love," she said. "It's in the walls. It's in the floors." I was so busy seeing the work, I couldn't see the love. This isn't just a house. It's a living thing. I smiled, my eyes misting over. "Yes," I said. "It is. I don't know what the distant future holds. Perhaps one day, the house will truly become too much for me. But that will be my decision, made with my family, based on my needs and feelings, not on their fears or convenience." The power dynamic had been restored. I was back in the driver's seat of my own life. The lesson in all of this wasn't just for David and Sarah. It was for me, too. I learned that love sometimes requires speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes. I learned that forgiveness is not a weakness, but the only way to heal a broken bond. And I learned that the strength Michael saw in me was always there. I just had to remember it. As I write this, I am sitting in my favorite armchair by the window. The same chair Michael picked out for my reading nook. The evening sun is streaming in, casting long, golden shadows across the familiar floorboards. I can hear the children laughing in the garden. I can hear David and Sarah talking in the kitchen. The house is full. It is alive. It is loved. They asked me to leave my home. But in the end, by almost losing it, we all found our way back. The story of this house isn't over. It's simply begun a new, more honest chapter. And for as long as I am here, I will be its heart, just as Michael wanted. And when the time comes for me to pass it on, I know its foundations of love are stronger than ever, ready to shelter the next generation of our family's stories. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe, like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.